Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 153, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. The mighty Ogo, truly the only committee that matters. Before we start, everyone, please, just a reminder to keep your headphones away from your microphone so we can protect the hearing of our very valued interpreters who are working hard with us today. We'll start off. Welcome, Minister Hajdu. Welcome back to Ogo. It's been a few years since we've had you here. I assume you'll have an opening statement for us?
I do. Thank you very much, Mr.
The floor
Chair.
is yours.
And appreciate the invitation to come to GoGo. I think this is an important conversation about how we can focus our energies as a government and as in a country on growing Indigenous economy opportunities. And of course, today we're here to talk about the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses. Investing in Indigenous communities and building up Indigenous businesses and entrepreneurs benefits all Canadians. According to the 2022 National Indigenous Economic Strategy for Canada, the continued exclusion of Indigenous peoples costs the Canadian economy about $27.7 billion every year. The National Indigenous Economic Development Board found that closing the existing employment gap could help lift over 150,000 Indigenous people out of poverty. Since 2015, we've been focused on strengthening self-determination and building capacity so Indigenous people and businesses have the tools and resources to fully participate in the economy on their own terms. For example, the government increased education funding by 80%, helping more kids access high-quality education right at home. Over the last decade, BDC found that expanded access to education has led to a 49% increase in the number of Indigenous people aged 25 to 64 in full-time employment. That's right, a full 49% increase. The Indigenous economy has the potential to grow from $32 billion to $100 billion in the next 5 years. And leaders like Tabitha Bull from the CCIB have been clear that procurement is a key part of hitting that target. Since the 5% minimum target was implemented, the value of contracts going to Indigenous businesses increased by $1.5 billion. Now, while I've been the minister responsible for this file since 2021, our government has been engaging with Indigenous partners from across the country for years. In particular, I'd like to highlight the ways that the department has engaged with Indigenous partners to improve procurement procedures. We are transforming the procurement strategy with Indigenous partners. We are all focused on improving policies, safeguards, and processes. They have told us what will work and what does not, and we are listening. We're also actively working with partners on how best to transfer the role of defining and verifying Indigenous businesses to Indigenous peoples. Transferring the definition and the registration of Indigenous businesses from the government to Indigenous peoples will help us reach the ultimate goal of increased Indigenous economic activity. Parliamentarians need to work together, including through studies just like this one, to identify the existing barriers to economic reconciliation and new ways to break them down. Programs like PSIB are getting us closer to a Canada that maximizes its true economic potential. PSIB is opening doors for Indigenous participation, and historically those doors have been intentionally closed. Laws like the Indian Act systemically excluded Indigenous people to the point of being legislated out of the economy, as described by many Indigenous leaders. Members of the committee, I thank you for the opportunity to reinforce the federal government's commitment to building Canada's economy in partnership with Indigenous peoples, and I look forward to our conversation today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll start with Mr. Genuis. Before we start, though, everyone, because we only have 1 hour with the minister, we're normally pretty loose watching the clock, but I'm going to stick to the exact 6, 5, 2.5 today, please. So please pay attention to your time clock. Mr. Genuis, go ahead, please.
Minister, should Randy Boissonnault still be in cabinet?
Well, I can tell you that the business that Mr. Boissonnault was involved in was never on the Indigenous Business Directory.
Mm-hmm. Do you think he should still be in cabinet?
That's not a decision for me to make, Mr. Genuis.
Okay. It's interesting that you're not saying yes. Do you endorse his conduct as minister?
I can tell you that Mr. Boissonnault's business was never listed on the Indigenous Business Directory.
He's a cabinet colleague of yours. You work together closely, I would presume. I ask if you think you should stay in cabinet, and your and you're declining to answer that. Do you endorse his conduct as minister? What do you think of what he has done?
I can tell you that GHI, the business that Mr. Boissonneau was co-owner of, has never been on the IBD.
Okay, I think you're saying a lot by not saying a lot, Minister. So I'll move on to my next question. Is Global Health Imports still eligible to receive government contracts?
I believe they are, but they are, as I said, not part of the Indigenous Business Directory. I can't answer in affirmative.
They represented themselves as Indigenous owned. They did so falsely. They are still eligible to receive government contracts. Do you think there should be penalties for companies that misrepresent their Indigenous identity? Should they be prevented from bidding further on government contracts?
In fact, there are penalties for fraudulent behavior, and I would hope that anybody that is procuring on behalf of the Government of Canada is careful about which businesses they procure from to make sure that proper business practices are followed. And certainly the Government of Canada has measures that it can take if it's found that businesses have acted fraudulently and should.
Okay. You mentioned there are consequences for fraudulent activity, which I hope would include misrepresentations around Indigenous identity. Did Global Health Imports, in your view, as the Indigenous Services Minister, engage in fraudulent activity?
I can't make that determination, but I can tell you that the Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance with PSPC can take steps such as banning a business from future...
Sorry, I'll just jump in because I know there are options available, but okay, you don't want to rule specifically on the case of Global Health Imports. Let's take a hypothetical case where you have a company involved in health imports, let's say, that's owned by two people. Hypothetically, one of them happens to be a minister of the Crown, and they are bidding on government contracts and in the process claim to be an Indigenous-owned company. That claim turns out to be completely false. If that hypothetical company, in the process of pursuing government contracts, falsely claimed to be Indigenous-owned, would that be considered fraudulent activity?
It could possibly be, but that would be a decision by the Office of the Supplier Integrity and Compliance. I don't run that particular organization, so I would say that from my perspective, when there's allegations of fraud, it's very serious. And I think departments have a responsibility to ensure that they're procuring from companies that are not fraudulent. So
right, but so just definitionally, right? Like it would seem that the definition of fraud is misrepresenting the facts in some way in order to achieve a commercial advantage. Right? Pretending something is true when it's not in order to achieve a commercial advantage. So you have a company that pretended to be Indigenous owned when it wasn't Indigenous owned. The purpose of that pretense was clearly to increase its chances of getting government contracts that it wouldn't have otherwise gotten. Is that fraud?
What I would say is I think we're saying the same thing, that the process of ensuring that people claiming indigeneity should be with integrity, because what we want is we want Indigenous economic success. So I think we agree. And I think that any time that there's fraud in terms of allegations of identity, that is a very serious infraction. Now, what happens next is up to places like the Office of Supplier Integrity, but I can tell you that we, on our side, in Indigenous Services Canada, take integrity around indigeneity seriously. Although it is challenging.
And let me jump in here. I would hope the Prime Minister would take that integrity seriously and fire this minister from cabinet. Just in the time that I have left, Minister, are there any other companies owned by Liberal cabinet ministers or MPs, former MPs, or Liberal appointed senators that are on the Indigenous business list?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but we can commit to checking that out for you and getting the information back.
Okay, thank you. I think the committee would agree that we're interested in receiving that in the usual timeline. A list, the names of any companies on the Indigenous business list that are owned by Liberal MPs, cabinet ministers, appointed senators, or former MPs.
Thank you very much. Mr. Batiste for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Patty, for joining us, Minister. There's a lot of, we heard from Joanna Bernard, the Regional Chief of New Brunswick, there's a lot of complexities involved in Indigenous identity. She had mentioned, the challenges around the second generation cutoff, where if you have children outside of people registered under the Indian Act for 2 successive generations, that you lose your status as an Indian. And so there's a definite cutoff point for First Nations or status Indians in Canada. However, when we're talking about Inuit, when we're talking about Métis, there isn't that definition in place that we can look to. In fact, the Supreme Court of Canada said in the Daniels case that there was no consensus definition for what it is to be Métis, nor need there be. During the study of C-53, we heard, there was a lot of people who believe that if you have Indigenous and European ancestry, that you're a Métis. But we know that, that's not the recognized definition from the Métis National Council. And so I'm wondering if when we're looking at this, and we're looking at Indigenous identity and the overall job of government to try to figure out who should be eligible and who shouldn't be eligible, do we have help from any organizations that can help guide government? Because, it's pretty clear in UNDRIP, which is law, under Article 33, that nations want the ability to determine who their own citizens are, and that's part of the work why we're working with AFN on the second generation cutoff. I'm wondering if you can speak to first, what kind of outside help are we getting from Indigenous organizations to help clarify these very muddy waters when it comes to people thinking they might be Indigenous because they have some mixed ancestry in somewhere in their family lineage, and how do we educate Canadians as to what are the actual defined definitions of the different First Nations, Inuit, and Métis in Canada?
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt before you proceed, and I've stopped the clock. I understand there's some people in the room taking photos. Please, that's not allowed, so just FYI, please. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, MP Batiste. And I think you've touched on something that I think is essentially very sensitive and kind of a legacy of a colonial system that was designed to divide people into categories of Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And the challenge is that, of course, those definitions evolve. You mentioned second generation cutoff, and you would know as one of the MPs heavily invested in the study that's going on right now that even that issue of second generation cutoff is a sensitive issue for families impacted, but also for communities that are impacted. There is a criteria for inclusion on the Indigenous Business Directory. I can read it out here, but I'm sure you already understand that as part of your study right now. We are working with First Nations partners, business partners in particular, like NACA, like the CCIB, like ITK, like the Métis Nation, and various different Métis nations that are not part of Métis Nation of Canada. These are the commitments that we've made as a government, is to continue to have these complicated conversations with Indigenous people as they define for themselves how to define their memberships. And I think it is an important conversation for Indigenous people to have, but for Canadians to understand that it isn't as clear cut as some would like to think, or some would like to have it be, quite clearly.
And so we heard from Regional Chief Joanna Bernard that this was one of the things that was a concern for her. I offered to AFN to submit something to this committee that kind of clarified where they stood on the Indigenous identity. I'm wondering if your department has received any kind of resolution from AFN stating, this is where we would like to see this conversation go next? Because you're right, the First Nations I've talked to across Canada do not want a government committee, do not want a government department stating who and who isn't a member of their community. I think you've said that. I agree with it. And I think, so how do we best manage that situation when you have communities saying, well, we don't want the colonial mistakes of the past to continue, rather we want to be a part of the solution? How are we doing that?
Well, first of all, do you want to just speak to the AFN resolution, Keith?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. I will just say, first of all, that what we are doing is working with a variety of different Indigenous organizations, including the AFN, to look at ways that the government can transfer the responsibility for Indigenous procurement, Indigenous business directory to Indigenous organizations. And so far, as you would know, there isn't a consensus yet. I've been thinking a lot about consensus in this space, and I think there isn't a consensus in Parliament, as you know, on legislation on approaches. So I think sometimes the federal government looks for consensus in Indigenous places or Indigenous spaces in an unrealistic or maybe an unfair way. And so we are working with partners right now about how best to transfer the responsibility for indigeneity and proof of indigeneity without driving towards a one-list solution. That may be part of the evolution of how this goes, simply because I think as I've gotten to know the partners, it appears that consensus may not be feasible in this space, and that is a reality with such a diverse group of Indigenous people across the country.
Yes, and we've definitely seen
I'm
it.
afraid that's
Okay.
our time.
I'll get another round.
Mrs. Vignola, please.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Over the past few months, I'll give you time to get your earpieces on. Thank you. It wasn't just you, but for everybody. Yes, I'm trying to improve my understanding, my comprehension. Yeah, no problem. It's for everybody around the table. My questions are good for everybody. Now, over the past few months, we noticed, or it was found, that some businesses were found to not be Indigenous, even though they qualified themselves as such. I was wondering, during the audits or the checks, were there businesses that ended up not being actual Indigenous businesses?
Every 2 years, the department audits the indigeneity of businesses, just because businesses transform quite a bit in between audits. And today, in 2022, 1,100 Indigenous businesses were removed from the Indigenous Business Directory as part of a cleanup of businesses that were registered before 2019. I could maybe turn to Keith to speak about those.
Et de ces 1122 entreprises,
Of these 1,122 businesses, which documents were requested to show and to prove their Indigenous businesses, or to show that they weren't considered as such any longer?
Let me just get the list here. Do you have the list? The evidence required for registration on the list of being an Indigenous person includes, but isn't limited to, Indian registration in Canada, citizenship with the Manitoba Métis Federation, Northwest Territories Métis Nation Saskatchewan, or a governing member of the Métis National Council, including the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, the Métis Nation of Alberta, the Métis Nation of BC, and the Métis Nation of Ontario, or a membership in an affiliate of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples or other recognized Indigenous organization in Canada, or acceptance as an Indigenous person by an established Indigenous community in Canada, or enrollment or entitlement to be enrolled pursuant to a comprehensive land claim agreement, or membership or entitlement to membership in a group with an accepted comprehensive claim. So the list there is a criteria. There are documentations required for each of those claims.
vous pourrez envoyer ces critères, celle de
Oui.
Merci au comité.
Could you please send those to committee? Thank you. You mentioned it earlier, but right now, there are a lot of questions being asked about who controls the IBD, who validates the indigenous nature of a business, and so on. In my opinion, it's really not up to us to tell a First Nation whether it is one or not. That's really up to them to determine who's a member, who's a business from their community. You were saying that you're looking for consensus. I want to ask a little bit more about the transfer of responsibility for the directory. Of course, we want a consensus, but what would it be in the end? What conditions would you have for that consensus?
Mais je pense
Inaudible. I believe there are other choices that the government can make with partners. For example, they can set up a separate list for each entity, for example.
still in discussion with the Indigenous partners about the best way to do this. For example, maybe each partner could have their own list. And I think what we would all agree at this committee is we don't want to do anything that weakens the opportunity for businesses. And so it's a delicate piece of work to find a path to transfer the list in a way that doesn't make it harder for government departments to procure from Indigenous businesses. What I really don't want to see is the government saying, this is too hard, we won't do it at all. And so I think everybody agrees at this table, this is a big, important piece of Canada's GDP growth.
Lors de sa comparution, vous parlez de discussion.
You talked about discussions and so on. I'm wondering who takes part in those discussions, who's listening, or who has to listen. Mr. Shane, who was from the Funding Association for these businesses, stated that there were attempts to work with the government, but that there were a lot of delays. They had a difficult time getting the support of Indigenous Services Canada for various projects, for infrastructure, for their organization, and so on. A letter was apparently sent to you, and the National Chief also sent a letter. There still has been no answer, is what we were told. So I just have a few questions left, but those are my questions. Who are the ones discussing and who are the ones having to listen?
You could provide a brief answer.
Really quickly, yes, there's over 30 partners, so I won't read them out, Mr. Chair, as that will take quite a long time, but we will distribute the list of the partners that have been involved in the consultations on how we move forward with the list.
Thank you. Ms. Blaney for 6, please.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister and her team for being here with us today to discuss this really important issue. And I think my first question, I really appreciate what you said about making sure that there's a process that you can pass some of this on to an Indigenous organization to do the work. I'm just wondering, though, is there any discussions internally about recognizing that Indigenous people should be the people who decide who their membership is? And what does that process look like? I expect it to be a bumpy road, but I think that one of the things I have concerns about is that the decision isn't being made. It's just sort of a discussion that keeps happening. So what work is actually happening to get that to the communities who had it in the first place and need it to be returned?
The lists were in the communities to begin? Is that what you
The
mean?
nations to decide who their membership is.
Yeah. I mean, this is ultimately the goal of decolonization, is to for the federal government to be out of the space of defining who is Indigenous.
So what's blocking that process from happening, though?
Well, I think, you're hearing concerns, and I think they're rightful concerns from a variety of different partners about people claiming indigeneity or claiming connection to community without necessarily being Indigenous or Indigenous descent. In fact, that's a part of this study, and I think this study is incredibly valuable.
Sorry to interrupt, but what I'm talking about is Indigenous communities deciding who is Indigenous and taking the government out of it completely. I understand what the intention is, but I'm wondering what is the process to that actually happening? Because it's something that keeps coming up, government after government, and it's not getting done. So I'm wondering what is the part
I would dispute
that
that it's not getting done. I mean, we've done quite a bit, as you know, on sex-based discrimination and restoring people's.
excuse me, but you're still keeping it within the government. This is a colonial system. The longer that we keep the identity of Indigenous people decided by a colonial system, that's the problem. It needs to go back to Indigenous communities, and they should be the ones deciding how that's going to work and what kind of processes that they would have around identifying that. I understand some of the complexity, but I think Indigenous communities understand it. So I think Mr. Khan is going to respond.
Yes, thanks for the question. So, as it currently exists, we have, like, for example, the Inuit. The Inuit determine their membership, not Canada, in terms of land claim beneficiaries. The Métis nations, all the governing boards have criteria for membership. They determine the membership, not Canada. The same applies to First Nations. Generally, the First Nations either use the Indian Act system in terms of registration, or they manage their own membership codes for membership. So they determine their membership.
It's still going through the government of Canada. You know the process as well as I do.
The liberty to remove themselves from the Indian Act is there to manage their own membership codes at their discretion. And following up on the previous question, so at this time, we are currently engaging as a department, First Nations leadership, communities, elders, to find solutions for the second generation cutoff as we speak. So those discussions are ongoing. So
Okay,
those are
thank you for that. So, you know, I hear what you're saying, and I just will respectfully say that the system is still held by the government. This is how it works. And we know that Indigenous people who are trying to fight these issues often have no choice but to go to the federal government to try to get support. And often the federal government says, I don't want to touch this because they don't want to be part of the identity process, but they are also still holding the reins. So my concern is that until that is done, it makes all of these other systems continue to falter. And what that does is it pits Indigenous people against Indigenous people, which is not very helpful. But it also means that the fraudulent claims are blocking Indigenous businesses that are legit from finding those opportunities because other people are using people or putting forward things that are not true. So I do want to say that I think it is incredibly important that be stepped out of, because until it's gone, until Indigenous communities and Indigenous processes are in place, we're going to continue to see these things. So I'm just wondering, Minister, you talked about the fact that it is fraudulent to pretend that you're of Indigenous identity, and you talked about penalties. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like, and if there's something that's actually done to make people accountable? We're seeing more and more people pretending that they are of Indigenous identity, which I think is very interesting and very concerning, and actually in a lot of ways pretty easy in terms of Indigenous communities to identify. So I'm just wondering, what are the penalties, and how do you work with the Indigenous communities that have had people claim they belong to them that don't? How do you support them as well?
Well, thanks, and I think so that's the flip side is that Indigenous communities often feel threatened by new people coming to community who sometimes claim connection to community, sometimes through issues of second generation cutoff, quite frankly, and that's why the study is so important, because in fact some chiefs have said that people appear to claim membership, and in fact they don't, as leaders of the community, recognize their lineage or their connection. And I think you're also right that all of this.
I apologize, Minister. That is our time. We're going to go to Mrs. Block for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to all of you joining us here today. Minister, we have heard repeatedly from Indigenous groups that the majority of the money that the government claims is going to Indigenous companies is actually going to shell companies and not Indigenous companies. And we've just read recently in the news a great example of this. with the company owned by Randy Boissonneau. And even though GHI was not listed on the Indigenous Business Directory, and you made mention of that, I think your departmental officials know differently and have agreed that they are still eligible to receive funding from ISC. We've also heard that there are little to no consequences for companies who pretend to be Indigenous. And I want to quote Shannon Mehta Tawaban, CEO of the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association. And they would have stated that there are very little penalties and that there need to be penalties for sure. And he actually went on to say it's criminal behavior to conduct fraud. So we have to take other steps and demonstrate to the world and to Canada that those actors who are engaging in this activity don't use this window and this program to access the federal government in a bad way. Do you agree that it's criminal behavior and that there should be penalties?
First of all, what I would say is I think we're saying the same thing in that Indigenous business procurement is a really critical aspect of Canada's economic growth, and we have to take
Minister,
it seriously. And,
I asked a very direct question.
and I'm going to give you a very direct answer.
Then I would ask you to get to that answer, please.
Great. And as I was saying, and that's why it's so important that we ensure that there isn't fraud in the space of claiming indigeneity. Now, as you know, Indigenous Services Canada.
Minister, my question was, do you believe it's criminal behavior when a non-Indigenous company claims to be Indigenous to steal money from Indigenous-owned companies through the set-aside?
What I would say is that fraud is fraud, and we do have an office that can look into claims of fraudulent behavior and apply a variety of penalties. And so I can't specifically give a general sweeping statement because, of course, different companies have different circumstances. But I would expect that anyone who's contracting through the federal government ensure that the laws of the land are upheld, including ensuring that fraud is not rewarded.
Thank you. Thank you. So Randy Boissonneau is a cabinet minister in the government of Canada. He's your colleague. He falsely claimed to be Indigenous in order to steal money set aside for Indigenous-owned businesses. As the Minister of Indigenous Services, will you commit to holding your colleague to account for running a company that falsely claimed to be Indigenous?
Well, as you know, first of all, I just want to reiterate that any false claims of indigeneity hurts the goal that I think you are obviously in favor of, which is increasing Indigenous economic activity in this country. And so I would say that
as the Minister of Indigenous Services, what will you do to hold your cabinet colleague to account for trying to defraud the government of Canada by claiming to be an Indigenous-owned business when they weren't?
I think I've been clear that Mr. Boissonneau's company has never been on the list.
That's not the question I'm asking. His actions speak for themselves. He claimed to be Indigenous. He claimed to be running an Indigenous business in order to access the set-aside that was meant for Indigenous-owned businesses. Will you join other members of Parliament in calling for his resignation? This file falls directly under your authority. And if you can go back to the Indigenous communities in your riding and tell them that he should not be held to account, that what he does was just fine, I think they will have something to say about that. You are the Minister of Indigenous Services. You have ministerial accountability. And when you know for fact that one of your colleagues has defrauded or attempted to defraud the government of Canada by claiming to be an Indigenous-owned business for the sole purpose of accessing something that they shouldn't have access to, I think you have a duty to call that member to account, especially when it falls under your jurisdiction as a minister.
Well, I'm really excited that
I'm
we're
sorry,
talking about my riding,
I
but
have to
obviously
interrupt.
my
That
time
is our
is up, so I
time.
won't get to
But we
share
are
with you
going
about
to
my
Ms. Atwin. I'm
incredible
sure you
riding.
might be able to give a response during her time. There, I just took away your time for you. Go ahead, Ms. Atwin, for 5.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and always good to see you in committee, Minister, as well as our important officials. Would you like to speak about your wonderful riding and answer that question?
Just for a few moments, in the current iteration of my riding, there are 12 First Nations in my riding, and in the new riding setup, I'll have another 7 First Nations in Northern Ontario. And so I rely on my riding quite a bit, actually, to, in particular, many chiefs in my riding, Chief Mushquash, Chief Mashano. Many chiefs have given me great advice about how to hold this very colonial portfolio with the utmost respect for First Nations. And so I'm very grateful to their advice.
Excellent, thank you. You mentioned the criteria for being listed on the Indigenous Business Directory. Can you speak to some of the checks and balances that exist to ensure that process has integrity?
Absolutely, and I have a whole list here of what the department does in order to ensure that people are on the list. I think I mentioned earlier that every 2 years an audit is conducted of the entire list to make sure that people's credentials have not changed in some way. The corporation structure has not changed in some way, as you know, increasingly. And this is a good sign. Corporations are growing, actually, and changing and acquiring other corporations. And so all of that must be sort of verified on the list. Of course, if a business is found to be non-compliant, they are removed and they can't compete for any contracts through the Indigenous Business Directory list. And of course, there are a number of pre-award audits that, in fact, since December 2023, led to the removal of 2 businesses from the list. And there are a number of post-award audits currently underway. And these are conducted by third-party auditors to make sure that we are really protecting the integrity of the goal of the program, which is to increase Canada's GDP and business economic development for Indigenous peoples.
Thank you. And you mentioned in 2019 that there had been a cleanup of the list. Did eligibility change, or it was just a process for the department to look back and make sure that there was integrity?
So it was really a process of looking back and making sure that integrity was still there, that the list itself was as refreshed as we could possibly make it. As I said, oftentimes people start off in one business formation and may acquire partners or other corporations. And so this is why the every 2 year audit is very important. So that we can actually understand how companies are changing over time. And, I would say that most companies are good actors and they will tell us when things are changing and they will keep up to date their information. But obviously, and, I think all colleagues around this table are very diligently working on ensuring the economic success of Indigenous business. And we have to do that by preserving and holding close the integrity of the process.
And we know that it largely targets, individual businesses or entrepreneurs. It could be tribal councils as well. But it also impacts the communities. Can you speak to how, what are the knock-on effects of investing in Indigenous businesses, and what are those larger economic impacts for communities?
I think that's such an important piece of this story, which is the growth of not only Indigenous business, but the growth of Canada's GDP through economic activity. And, we've often talked about the cost of keeping people out. And in fact, there's a lot of study around the continued exclusion. In fact, it's estimated to cost Canada's economy $27.7 billion each year by keeping people out of the economy. So that to me is just a dollars and cents reason, never mind any other reason for supporting Indigenous economic success. And in fact, I know you're from the East Coast, and there are a lot of very successful businesses on the East Coast run by Indigenous peoples. And I would imagine you see that impact in your own community. I'm from Northern Ontario. In fact, the CDC in Northern Ontario is partnered with a number of different First Nations organizations to conduct a study of the economic impact benefit of Indigenous business in Northern Ontario, and there are older studies that estimate huge amounts of revenue for non-Indigenous communities that have a high degree of Indigenous economic activity. So exclusion is really expensive, and this is the fiscally smart thing to do, is to make sure that people have this opportunity. And the last thing I'll say is it's exciting when I visit First Nations that also have corporations that are benefiting their communities. So many First Nations are now, for example, holding their own contracting and construction companies.
That is our time, Minister. Mrs. Vignola, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. Haidu, until very recently, an Indigenous woman who had children with a non-Indigenous man saw her children be considered non-Indigenous. That went on for 50 to 60 years. I think it's Section C2 or something. I could be wrong, but finally that was removed. Now, when it was the case of an Indigenous man having children with a non-Indigenous woman, those kids were Indigenous. Now, coming back to those children born of Indigenous women who didn't used to be recognized but now are, when they want to set up a business and have it be considered an Indigenous business, that can complicate things. Now, in terms of the list, maybe the solution would be to have more than just one list. Why not have one list, but that is fed by the lists from other organizations, those with whom you cooperate, as you call them? And of course, it would be a given that those lists would be kept up to date, and that would put an end to the situations such as the ones I described, where the children were or were not recognized or so on. And that's really, that happened because of the all-powerful Canadian government. So that's my first question. Mr. Ducharme of the Business Directory was saying that he was a witness here and said that his list was not recognized as being a valid one, even though they were Indigenous businesses on that list. How can we ensure that there is complete understanding and consensus when we are not recognizing what the Indigenous organizations themselves are doing?
30 seconds for a response.
Well, first of all, I think the study that this committee is doing is going to be very helpful in identifying alternative pathways to making sure that we keep the integrity of the Indigenous business procurement strategy intact. I mean, I think we're all saying the same thing, that we want Indigenous businesses to succeed. We want Indigenous people to have control over identifying who is Indigenous, and we want the government ultimately to get out of the business of identifying indigeneity. And the challenge will be to make sure that we do so in a way that doesn't make it more difficult for people to procure from Indigenous businesses, but really keeps that same system of being able to quickly identify Indigenous businesses to reach the target. I have to say that, we've done incredible work as a government over the last 10 years to meet the...
Minister,
I exceeded my time.
We only have
Thank you,
2.5
Mr. Chair.
minutes, I'm afraid.
No worries. Thank you.
Ms. Blaney, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. So if I could just come back to the idea you were talking about, Minister, about meeting with stakeholders and looking at the plan moving forward of what that's going to look like. Do you have any timelines that you could share with the committee on that work? Is there actual timelines? Because, I heard a lot of back and forth about the integrity of the process, but we also know that even with the process, people were fraudulently accessing these funds. So I understand to the level of integrity that you can have in the process, it's there, but it's obviously not there to the level that we would all like to see, I hope. So I'm just wondering if you could share a timeline moving forward of how this process is going to actually unfold and how long are we going to have to wait?
I'd like to turn to Jessica to talk about the consultations that have been underway and maybe a little bit about the timeline as well.
Thank you for the question. Since 2021, there's been work undertaken by something called the Transformative Indigenous Procurement Strategy, which is set to wrap up in 25-26. There's been extensive consultations both with Indigenous economic development organizations as well as directly with Indigenous businesses and communities. We're taking the feedback directly from those engagements to formulate next steps and move forward in the timeline. So we're looking specifically at the transfer of the validation and verification function of businesses, changes to the existing procurement strategy for Indigenous business that are designed to address the opportunities that exist for continuous improvement.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So I'm just wondering, at what point does the government get out of the business completely so that it's run by Indigenous led? I mean, this is what you're talking about. And I just want to say that, you know, it is not owned by First Nations people, for sure, identity. I mean, I have status children. Their children will have a lesser status because I'm not Indigenous. That's how it works. So that means that you can eventually get to a generation where you don't have status. So to me, this is the problem. The problem is that the government's involved. So you're talking about getting out? When?
I think Jessica was clear that the goal is that we would be able to have something in place by 2025. And I would say that sooner if possible. And I'm in conversations with the partners themselves who all agree that as soon as possible, they would like to manage lists, but they also all agree that they don't want a dilution of procurement from Indigenous businesses. And so that's the balance we're trying to reach.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barrett for 5, please.
Minister, today, Canada's first Indigenous Justice Minister and Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, who, as you know, was fired from cabinet by Mr. Trudeau for speaking out against and trying to stop his attempted obstruction of justice. She issued a statement online, and it said, "A prime minister committed to true reconciliation would have removed Randy and the other Randy from cabinet long ago. Instead, we get to watch white people play Ancestry Wheel of Fortune. So shameful and extremely destructive." Do you agree with that characterization?
What I would say is that Indigenous identity is any use of Indigenous identity in a fraudulent way undermines Indigenous people.
Okay, so we have a member of your cabinet, a member of your caucus, who a 50% owner of a company that claimed to be wholly Indigenous owned, applied for government contracts under that false pretense. To dispense with the pleasantries, Randy Boissonnault lied about who he is in order to profit, and in doing so, attempted to disenfranchise legitimate and actual Indigenous-owned businesses. Do you think that that is appropriate? And if you don't think it's appropriate, do you think that he should remain in cabinet?
What I would say is that GHI, the company in question, was never on the Indigenous Business Directory.
Right, and so they applied.
I cannot, for example, weigh in on what decision points were made when GHI was awarded contracts. And so I can tell you, though, with very high degree of confidence that he was not on the list.
He wasn't
defined indigeneity.
So he wasn't on the list. We know that he has previously said that he was Indigenous. He is now saying that he is not. So we know that he applied for a contract saying he was Indigenous. And this is the point that Ms. Wilson-Raybould has made. And it certainly undermines reconciliation. Would you agree that a cabinet minister claiming indigeneity to win government contracts and remaining in cabinet undermines the government's stated goal of reconciliation?
Well, I think Mr. Boissonnault's statement is on record, but what I can say is what I've just said, which is I think that when people utilize false claims of indigeneity, it's extremely harmful to Indigenous people, and it's extremely harmful to the process of reconciliation.
So thank you for that. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, said this morning, "I'm happy that he, Randy Boissonnault, is continuing to lead on issues around jobs and employment and represent Alberta in our government." So you agree that it's harmful. The Prime Minister doesn't. So do you agree or do you disagree with the Prime Minister with his delight that Mr. Boissonnault, who is a fraudster, is continuing to represent Alberta in the government of Canada, in your cabinet, all the while attempting to disenfranchise Indigenous individuals and Indigenous-owned businesses?
Well, I think what is important here is that it's not up to me or any other person to police people's indigeneity. And so for me, this isn't about...
Minister, he said it's not for you to police. He said he lied. So he's the one who said he lied. You know that he lied. And you just need to have the moral clarity to say that what he did was wrong. It undermines reconciliation. And that type of fraud is unacceptable in your government. The rest of my time to Mr. Genis.
Are there any instances of companies facing consequences for Indigenous identity fraud that you can identify?
I don't think I can answer that question.
Okay, I'll go to something else, but if you could provide us with a list afterwards of any instances of companies that have been faced consequences for Indigenous identity fraud and what those consequences would be. It's been reported that Randy Boissonnault's claims that his great-grandmother was Cree, that those claims were false. Those were claims that he personally made in the House of Commons. They have now been revealed to be false. Do you have any comment on that?
My comment stands. The issue of indigeneity, is not for me to determine who is Indigenous, but that in general, claims of indigeneity
Chair, and
that are false
in
are very
the seconds I have
Indigenous
left,
peoples.
the minister in the last round referenced the Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance as being able to answer certain questions that she has not able to answer. I wonder if there'd be agreement for us to hear from the Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance at some point to help shed some further light on these things.
You seem to be in agreement. That is your time.
Great. Thank you.
And we'll finish up with Mr. Batiste. Go ahead, please, for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm finding the whole conservative narrative a little bit problematic. I think that there are several different groups, whether it be academia, whether it be music, that have struggled with this question of who is Indigenous and who isn't. They're asking you to be the overall overseer and policing of this, and I can tell you that First Nations don't want that as a non-Indigenous minister to tell you who and who isn't Indigenous. But I feel it's even more hypocritical because when I was the Mi'kmaq coordinator for the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia, their citizenship code, I was watching as the Harper Conservatives stumbled through this whole process themselves with the recognition of the Mi'kmaq of Qalipu, where they, as part of their government, used a Métis test for First Nations in Newfoundland that resulted in 100,004 applications for a First Nations band. Now, the Conservatives would have you believe that everyone who thought they had a family member who was Mi'kmaq committed fraud. 104,000 people all across the Atlantic believed, they were eligible for this process because of the Harper-led Conservatives in this space of trying to identify who is Indigenous. So for them to sit up over here and say that we should have all the answers when they stumbled through their whole process on this, where I have people coming to my riding office who said, well, I was approved originally as a status Mi'kmaq, but now they revoked my status because I didn't have the things, and asking me why this is, because it's a complicated process. And I'm just wondering, Minister, if you think it's a little bit hypocritical, this whole narrative from the Conservatives trying to make something that's very complicated as simple as just the minister should, check a box and say, this is what it is to be Indigenous.
I think that's a really great point from an Indigenous person, which is that it should never be the minister pronouncing from this seat or really any seat with such little fact or information who is Indigenous. In fact, indigeneity, as you point out, is complex. There's an individual from a riding nearby me that has been raised in an adoptive family in a First Nation. He is non-Indigenous by birth, but he was adopted as an infant and has been fully adopted by the community. If you met him, you would not think he was Indigenous. He studies Indigenous issues. He speaks the language. He has been raised as an Indigenous person since he was 2 or 3 months old. And even his own narrative is one of complexity. How does he find himself in this place? And how does he navigate as someone who's deeply steeped in his family and his culture and his tradition, and yet fully non-Indigenous by birth, by DNA? And so I'm really glad that you raised this point. And all of this is the legacy of a colonial government that chose to, in those early days, divide people and dispossess people of land, culture, and language and identity. And now we're all here grappling with how to get back to a place where Indigenous people for themselves define who are members of their community, but also that we make amends as a country by ensuring that there is more equity in the systems that serve us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And in the time remaining, these are problems that we have to resolve collaboratively with First Nations communities. They have their own First Nations procurement organization that they're trying to set up because they have identified their problems around this. And I know the question that has been answered is, what are we doing to make space for them to take control? I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about where we are in the second generation cutoff consultation that we started with AFN in December to address these very concerns that were being brought to this table right now in a collaborative approach with First Nations youth, with First Nations communities, and just if you could talk about what that process is looking like.
Well, yes, and thank you again for your help in designing how to get this off the ground in a respectful way. Even the consultation has been designed by Indigenous peoples because it is such an emotional and heated space. I mean, ultimately, what we're talking about is families where, for example, Chief Bernard told me a very moving story where one of her children, her grandchildren are Indigenous or ordained Indigenous, and on the other child's lineage, those grandchildren are not, simply because of the nature of who her children chose to marry, and how painful that is for that family. And so those consultations are underway, and I believe they're happening in a very compassionate way because we chose to design those consultations together with First Nations peoples so that we could get to the answers about how to support people to reunite their families.
You can say thank you. That's about it.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you for the
And colleagues, that is our time. We are going to suspend to excuse the minister and bring our next set of witnesses in. We are suspended. you for your patience. Before we start, we are not doing opening statements, I understand. Wonderful. Before we start with Mr. Barrick, everyone just aware Ms. Gee, IT is going to contact her, so please just direct the questions to the two gentlemen in person in the meantime. Mr. Barrett, the floor is yours. Go ahead, please. 6 minutes.
In Emily Nicholson's email of June 17, 2024 to Minister Jolie's Chief of Staff, she states, both CNG and HOM, that's Mr. Clark, and staff have been instrumental throughout this process, with the HOM, Mr. Clark, providing the green light for the selection of the new residents. Do either of you have personal knowledge of Mr. Clark's involvement?
I don't have knowledge of his involvement, but no.
Have you spoken to Mr. Clark about this matter?
No.
So who relayed to you the information about this process?
It's a process that was a long process, Mr. Chair. It started 10 years ago, and all throughout those discussions, there was a lot of interaction with mission staff. So we are under the, we had a lot of discussion with people on the ground in the real property and administration team, and that information would have come from the administration team.
So when asked how Ms. Nicholson got this information, she stated that she engaged with the property branch, specifically you, sir, and your team, including the gentleman sitting to your right. So did you communicate, Mr. Dubois, or correspond with Ms. Nicholson about the summary that she had provided in her briefing note?
Mr. Chair, I did. We interact very often with Deputy Minister Associate Office.
Okay, so what was the date that you had that interaction?
I had a written interaction with that with Ms. Nicholson on June 14th.
Okay.
Where I was fulfilling a request to provide details with regard to the transaction.
And you, Mr. Hunzangbe?
Yes. Mr. Chair, I had an interaction with Emily Nicholson on June 16 on that matter.
What about on the matter of the correction that she issued by email on July the 25th?
Mr. Chair, on July 25th, I had an interaction with Ms. Nicholson, but it was a request for additional information and clarification, which I provided. There was no notion of correction in that at that moment.
So nothing that covered her previously having said that the head of mission was dissatisfied with his residence and was looking for a change, or that he'd been instrumental in selecting the new place. No change in that verbiage that she'd used in that briefing note.
We took the July 25th opportunity to add more information and clarify, because the message that came out in June, on June 14th, that I provided was done very quickly, and tried to summarize it as much as possible. On the 25th, there was more details in the message.
Since we're going back and forth about a lot of dates, could both of you gentlemen please table for the committee any specific correspondence on this or surrounding those two dates between you and Ms. Nicholson? Would you be comfortable providing that to the committee?
We can go back and, but I believe that those correspondence would be included in the package that has already been submitted to the committee.
Okay, so it looks like Ms. Nicholson shared the truth on the 17th of June in her email. And then there was interaction with the minister's office. And then this committee sent for Mr. Clark as part of our investigation. And then she issued a correction. And then her story changed from the truth to what she offered later. And that the chronology, the path, appears like that direction came from the property branch. So, gentlemen, you're the subject matter experts. Who in Minister Jolie's office did you coordinate with in making those corrections, those clarifications that she mentioned in the July email?
Well, Mr. Chair, as I explained, the message on June 14th was to provide information on that transaction. On June 25th, we provided more information. I did not coordinate directly with the minister's office. I was in contact with Ms. Nicholson, who's the chief of staff of the deputy minister associate.
So, did you have any interaction with anyone in the minister's office?
No, I didn't have any interaction.
So
with
between the
minister's
14th of June and the 25th of July, you had no interaction with the minister's office?
No.
So in the original summary that you said you provided to Ms. Nicholson, your summary said that Mr. Clark was instrumental? That was the information that you provided to her, and that it was issued hastily, or that was something that she surmised on her own?
That information is not contained in what I provided.
Okay, so where would she glean that information from? She described herself as merely air traffic control. She was just taking bits of information out of the air and landing them on a piece of paper. So if not from you, who is you're the responsible individual, the subject matter expert, then where would she have got that?
Well, Mr. Chair, I think Ms. Nicholson has testified on it to say that it was a misstatement that she had put in her email, and then she expressed her intent that was to basically convey that the head of mission was aware of the situation.
Sir, she said that you provided her with the summary.
I provided Ms. Nicholson with a summary of the transaction, and there was no mention of Mr. Clark being instrumental.
That is our time, gentlemen. We'll go now to Mr. Souza, please, for 6 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So let me get this straight. The Consul General in New York is one of the most important missions that we have in regards to our relationships with the United States, and the official residence home to one of Canada's most senior diplomats, right? The concerns about the conditions of the official residence were actually first raised in 2014. And furthermore, the new official residence, as I understand it, is now one of the lowest costs per square foot. It cuts monthly costs in half, savings of about $115,000 a year, and it represents $7.4 million in savings to Canadians as a consequence of the sale of the old residence into the new residence. So here we have a senior diplomatic mission in the United States that all provinces use, that many other Canadians have taken advantage of with regards to trade negotiations and discussions. In fact, I understand that the head of the mission's residence supports diplomacy and trade and has hosted over 50 official functions in the last 2 years, including business events, roundtable discussions, seminars, and briefings. It's a very active residence in regards to the work it does with our counterparts and partners in the United States. So the question now before us is, was the minister involved in the decision to sell the old official residence or the purchase of the new residence? Did that happen? Was the minister involved in those decisions?
Mr. Chair, no, the minister was not involved in that decision.
Is it normal, however, to have the tenant of the residence be aware of what is taking place?
It's absolutely part of the process to make sure that the tenant is aware of the plan.
And would you ask the tenant for the status of which the issues are undergoing and their ability to make that move?
Well, in building the statement of requirements, we will solicit the input from the mission administration that may include some.
So there's nothing untoward. Regarding the semantics that's being passed around here today, there's nothing untoward about having that discussion, correct?
Correct.
All right. Did Tom Clark have any influence in making the decision?
No, Mr. Clark didn't have any impact on or influence on the decision. The decision followed a process that was supervised by a governance body that had stakeholders from all over the department.
Understood. Did Tom Clark approve the decision to sell or buy?
No, he did not.
Right. Did Tom Clark approve the decision to purchase another residence? No. Was he involved? How many other options were available to the purchase?
Well, we reviewed 21 residents or 21 apartments when we did the due diligence and the review. Yeah.
I know it's a complex process. I know there's a lot of diversified elements that come to fruition to make a transaction of this size. a reality in parts of your overall retirement portfolio. Can you briefly explain, for the purposes of this committee, the process that leads up to that decision?
Absolutely. I will certainly ask my colleague, Mr. Ouzangbe, to provide more details because
Please
he's
do.
really the person in charge of the process. But what I can say is there's a very sophisticated process by which we do a full analysis of the whole the whole lifespan of the assets, and then this analysis goes through different kind of lenses. There's legal, there's security, there's procurement. There are a lot of
Out of curiosity, if Mr. Tom Clark says, "I don't like that residence," does he have? Does that mean it won't be purchased?
No, it would.
It's not up to him.
It's not up to him. No.
Can you explain more, Mr.
Mr. Chair, yes, I was very involved in this transaction. I did oversee the transaction from start to finish. I was the chair of the Real Property Governance Committee that oversaw the transaction, and I did sign the transaction, so very happy to provide some clarification elements. It's a three-step process to review these sort of transactions. The first one is to establish what the requirement is. In other words, what is the problem that we're trying to solve with a given property. That is overseen and approved by governance. The second step is to think about the option analysis. What are the different options that can resolve the problem identified in step one, and that is again approved by a governance committee. And the third piece is the expenditure authority, confirming that all the conditions have been met with the property and that it's been thoroughly reviewed by security legal stakeholders.
Much more time? 50 seconds. Can you explain Tom Clark's involvement at the beginning and at the end?
Mr. Chair, I've had no interactions with Mr. Tom Clark. He was, to my knowledge, not directly involved in the decision-making process to either dispose of the current official residence or the selection process to acquire the new one. He was aware of our intentions and our plan, and it was clear to us, but his role was limited to making sure that the doors of the unit could be opened for appraisals or visits or things of that nature.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Vignola for 6.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being with us again, to the witnesses. We should have received the rules surrounding the condo rules rather, but I don't think we have the ones for the cooperative. Is that something that we could obtain so that we can do a complete analysis of the restrictions and so on that were mentioned in other meetings? Next, the current representative of Canada in the U.S. lives at 550 Park Avenue also. Could you please just repeat? The UN representative also lives at 550 Park Avenue. For that residence, is it up for possibly being sold also?
Monsieur le Président, c'est une bonne question.
Mr. Chair, that's a great question. The two apartments, and possibly Mr. Zangbe will want to add something, but those apartments, even though they are in the same building, are quite different in terms of their configuration and also their general state. The one that is currently housing our UN representative is configured over 2 floors, so it's completely different from the other one. And it was also renovated in 2010, 2011. So it's not one that is in the same condition that we saw at 12E, which is Mr. Clark's current apartment. All right. And in the UN, Canada's UN representative in that apartment, are there also official dinners, receptions, and so on that are held there? Absolutely. Now, so the rules that apply to 12E also apply to the other apartment. So how are the rules less restrictive for the UN representative than for the consul in terms of receptions and so on? Mr. Chair, the same rules apply to both. And there are receptions and events held in both residences right now, but both are subject to certain restrictions that have been reported to us by the consulates or their representatives. So both apartments are subject to the same restrictions and activities, but it's not always the same number of people who appear, or they're also in different states. You were also saying that the UN representative's condo was renovated recently. Does that include accessibility issues, as we heard for the consul's condo? As far as I know, the renovations that were done in 2010, 2011 would not have been the same. The regulations would not have been the same because those came in 2021. So it's more the different equipment, make the apartment more modern and extend its lifespan. Now, is there an evaluation notice or assessment for the upcoming updates, for example, on accessibility, future costs? Mr. Chair, that's a good question. I'd have to check. What I know is that that apartment has not yet gone through the complete review process that the 12E apartment has gone through, because it's deemed to be in a good enough state still. So it hasn't gone through the same review process for the condition of the apartment. But that will be part of the elements that are taken into consideration when the review is done, and then we'll try to see what the best option is to update its condition. Thank you very much. These questions aren't directly related to the 12E, but I just wanted to draw a comparison also between the two situations, since both apartments are in the same building. If the UN representative, it won't be in the same place as what we're looking at now, since there are no more apartments left. Now, in terms of 12E, I was also wondering whether the opinions of the previous consuls to New York were taken into account regarding that residence and its functionality. Mr. Chair, I don't have that information exactly on that, the previous general consul's opinions, but since 2022, I have been talking with the administration officer in charge of real estate or real property, and since 2014, there have been reports of the three elements we've mentioned: the configuration of the floor, that is just not optimized for receptions and so on, restrictions, co-op restrictions because of the rules, and also the accessibility rules that were added after 2021. So those are the three elements that have been reported to me by the Chief of Staff during those years. Thank you very much, Mr. Dubois. I have, 10, 12 seconds left, so I'll leave them to my colleagues. I'll have other questions later.
Thanks. Before we get to Ms. Blaney, we're just going to suspend for 30 seconds to try another mic check. Ms. Blaney for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Chair, and I thank the witnesses for being here today with us. I guess for me, when I look at this process, it's really about understanding the policy, and I understand the concern about people asking for things they shouldn't, and but it sounds to me like you guys did amazing work, so I just want to say thank you. I know that you are very diligent. So could you just explain to me a little bit more about when you're looking at these properties and moving towards having these properties purchased, what do you look at in terms of resellability? We know that Canadians want to know that their investment is sound and that it would bring equity, hopefully, to the country eventually. So I'm just wondering if you could talk about value for money and the process that you go through.
Thank you for the question. It's a good one. It's part of when we do the life cycle assessment in a real property transaction. We look at all of the costs associated with an asset and also all of the potential gain in values that this asset may take. As I'm sure you understand, New York is one of the highest and more active market on the planet. So we did look at what could be the appreciation of the asset over time. We are not in the business of creating capital gains out of our transactions, but we certainly look at what is the potential value for Canadians in terms of not only being able to use it, so it's well located in an area that will allow us to that will be conducive to our business type, which is diplomatic kind of activities. But those areas are also those areas where normally we will have assets that will retain and gain values. So we do look at this. This is not a primary factor, but it is certainly a factor. Maybe my colleague, Mr. Uzangbe, wants to add a little bit to this.
Mr. Chair, the question was also around the policies around this, and that's definitely part of my my area of responsibility. What we're using when selecting a property in New York or anywhere else is Chapter 5 of the 2014 Property Management Manual, and that acts a little bit as a checklist for us to see for that class of official residents. These are the different elements that we need to take into account, and we check them against the requirement of the official residents. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I'm going to try Mr. Huzambe. I got it. Okay. Or I somewhat got it. So I appreciate that. So one of the things that I've found out through my own personal research is that the contractor that was part of building this building was a non-union contractor and actually had some really poor labor practices in his time of building, where a lot of people were out wages and whatnot. So I'm just wondering if there isn't a policy at looking at the ethical building of a place that we might be buying into. Is there a process that we could go through that would actually allow that to be a policy or regulation that we look at when we're purchasing? It makes me sad to think that people suffered and now we're living in that place. A representative of Canada is living in that space. So I'm just wondering if there's any thought to that, or could it be something that was explored?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question and the opportunity to clarify. Certainly, that's something that we are sensitive to. We did understand the context surrounding the construction of this building via the work of this committee. Currently, I'm not aware of any policy that governs that governs specifically that area. I think the government of Canada is sensitive through any acquisition to the labor involved and the impact on labor. Certainly, that's something that we can take under advisement, but at the moment, I'm not aware of any policy that dictates a review of the labor conditions before the acquisition is made.
Thank you. I have no more questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to Mrs. Kusi, please. We'll go to Mr. Brock.
Officials, you have now confirmed that the consular office in New York City is one of the most important missions in America. And by extension, clearly the Consul General, Tom Clark, is in a very influential position within America and his relationship with Canada. Would you agree with that?
The mission in New York is one of the largest mission and most important one we have.
And Tom Clark himself carries a lot of weight. He was chosen for a reason, and his position carries a lot of weight. You agree with that?
I would agree that all heads of missions have an important kind of status.
Right. Now, Tom Clark appeared at this committee September 12th, 2024, and I'm going to read out his words. Mr. Chair, I will repeat once again, and please, if you wish, you can put me under oath for this. I had nothing to do with the decision to sell the old official residence. I had nothing to do with the decision to buy the new official residence. I had nothing to do with deciding on its amenities or its location. Officials, we have 2 official documents from your department that say to the contrary. The first was through an ATIP, and it says that the Council General in April 2023, 2 months after his appointment, shortly after his famous jovial ride in the limousine with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, informed ACM senior management that the property is not suitable for representational activities and it is not suitable as a residence and requires immediate replacement. Immediate replacement. That follows up with an email from Emily Nicholson, which confirms that the Council General, Tom Clark, and his staff have been instrumental throughout this process, with Tom Clark providing the green light for the selection of the new residents. These are 2 official documents from your department that cast serious discrepancies on the veracity of Mr. Clark's statement. It's time for you to stop running cover for Tom Clark and to confirm, as you've already confirmed, that you've been in regular contact with his office, that he indeed was instrumental. He asked for an immediate replacement. So both versions of the truth can't be right at the same time. Tom Clark has been lying to this committee, lying to the public, and you are covering up, other officials at GAC are covering up for this lie. So what do you have to say about that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to clarify. One comment that is being referred in terms of Mr. Clark, what Mr. Clark would have said is like third-hand information that would have been reported by his team to the project team that have made.
Well, let's talk about that. What does ACM stand for?
It's an acronym, a symbol that we use in the department.
Okay. He says he informed ACM senior management. I want a list of everybody he spoke to. Can you give me some names right now?
Well, the document says that Congen informed ACM. Congen is the mission, not the Consul General himself. So
Okay.
the mission has reported that
So who were the names of the officials at GAC that Singen reported to?
We are ACM here.
You are
the
all
senior management.
ACM?
Yeah.
Okay.
The both of us.
And you will table any and all documentation to this committee in relation to that level of communication in April of 2023?
I can go back and look at what exists, but yeah.
Okay, so we have you 2 individuals in person. We have one who's having difficulty connect. Was she also involved?
No, I wouldn't think so.
Is it just the 2 of you?
Yes.
Okay. What about senior management? Were they informed?
Well, we did inform senior management, being the deputy minister associate, on June 14th of the transaction.
Who in particular at the mission itself in New York City were you communicating with?
Oh, my interaction with the mission, it was through the head of administration.
Okay, I want names. Can you identify all the names that you were communicating with at the mission?
Yeah, I did provide the name at the last meeting. It would be the management consular officer.
Was that the only person?
There are 2 of them because there was a rotation in 2023. But yes, I have 2 individuals that have been in contact.
And you've supplied this committee with those names?
I did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baines, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. Department officials for joining us today. I wanted to just first ask, is it common for a new head of a mission to express views on their accommodation at all?
Thank you for the question. It would be common for any head of mission or any occupant of our provided properties abroad to have an opinion about their housing.
And what kind of opinions? Is it like, okay, is this suitable for this? It's not operational. Is it suitable for meetings? What can we host here? Is this, what are sort of some of the views that they would want to express? Like, I mean, if I go into a workplace and into a highly important role ultimately, and you have a strategy of how you're going to carry out your duties, how you're going to, establish relationships, and all of these things. So, what are some of the maybe views that other mission heads have stated in when they've been deployed to certain mission regions?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's as we explained before. If we stick to official residences, those official residences are workplaces, so in which employees will be delivering all kind of representation functions. So all of the criterias that are associated with being able to deliver those functions could be subject to an opinion. Sometimes, the accessibility would be one. The security could be one as well, depending on where you are in the world. There's also the seating arrangement, the number of people that can be accommodated, the kind and type of event that can be hosted there. So all of those elements could, its location sometimes could be as well subject to an opinion to say that it's not best located because it's not attracting the kind of business or business people that we want to bring into the official residence. And the second half of the official residence is living quarters for heads of missions, and they will often have opinions about the living quarters for say, and you also have the division of the two. So in the case of New York, there were issues about the floor plan layout not dividing very well the representational space, sorry, and the private space, which also is an issue that is raised by heads of missions often.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for a workplace area to be separated from a living space where you don't need, when you're conducting business, people walking through certain areas. That would be a private area. I understand that. So when selecting, I know we've talked a little bit about this, selecting the present property locations, also based on where our, allied nations may be, some of our greater trade partners. For example, we know where we have now a new administration coming in the United States. And it's important for G7 nations to ensure that their priorities are met, and the friend shoring is important right now. So, can you maybe speak a little bit more to how important the location and this specific location where it's situated with some of our key trade partners?
Well, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to provide a bit of details, and I'm sure my colleague, Mr. Uzangbe, will have a bit more to add, but I would start that those official residences have to be one of the most important criteria, would be security. So we have to be located in secure areas for our heads of missions, which is normally in the vicinity of our like-minded, as you mentioned. So being close to our G7, G20, and other allies would be critical for the conduct of the kind of business we have. Also, as well, the proximity of local authorities, making sure we can connect with what are the local either business or diplomatic or governmental organizations. Another factor we take into account is the proximity of our office. So we want to be in the vicinity of where the offices are to facilitate the transit in between the two facilities. I don't know, Mr. Uzangbe, if I forgot anything that you would like to add.
We have no time is what I think he wants to add. So perhaps you can get to it with Mrs. Vignola's round. Go ahead, Mrs. Vignola.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I need a reminder. When was the decision made to purchase instead of renovate taken? I'll let Mr. Uzangbe answer that because the process is really under his supervision. Mr. Chair, the official date is June 29, 2023. Thank you. So let me know whether I'm mistaken, but a council is there for 4 years, is on their posting for 4 years. Yes, with the possibility of extension depending on the negotiations. Yes, 4 years. When they appeared, the appraiser and the broker stated that a condo goes for, on average for $1.6 million. And I said, what do we get for that? What do you get for $1.6 million? You know, because that seems cheaper. And he said, well, a studio. You know, one person in a studio, if you can use shared offices on Lexington Avenue or something, that might be something that you could handle. But is a council always single? Sometimes do they take their children with them? You know, when you plan a residence for a council, or is it just for that council, or is it for, you know, a possibility of whoever's going to come in with family or not over decades? Yes, your question is very relevant when we know that a property's life cycle will be 50 to 60 years. We try to have as much flexibility as possible in terms of number of rooms, configurations in terms of family and number of rooms, rather. There could be people who are single, people who have families with more members. We need to have residences that will serve all of those councils. Often, thank you, we often hear about 60 years as a lifespan. I want to mention that because I think it's something that's common in the Americas. And elsewhere in the world, 60 years is quite short. There are buildings that, you know, are 700 years old or a few hundred years old. Why don't we try to aim further, to look further in our processes? I mean, that would be remarkable. Canada has a residence, a 200-year-old residence in New York. I mean, wouldn't that be great? Why don't we go further than 60 years?
We do not have time for a response, but perhaps you can provide that in writing to us. We'll go to Ms. Blaney, and then we'll finish up with Mr. Brock, Mr. Jouari. Then I need about 30 seconds committee biz to do the budgets, which went out last week.
No.
Go ahead, Ms. Blaney.
So you can respond to her question, and then I have no more questions.
OK, merci. Merci de l'opportunité de clarifier.
Thank you for this opportunity to clarify. We're not aiming 6 years necessarily. When we conduct the financial analysis, we actually limit ourselves to 20 years because it's the next 20 years that are the most critical. We don't necessarily have a time limit. I don't know if we have any official residences that are over 100 years old, but it's very possible that the locations are in heritage buildings or that they are many decades old. The issues are more in terms of the deterioration or the midlife refit. That's around 50 to 60 years that we do that. So that's what we want to know. Can we get to 50, 60 years and then make the decision? Is it still viable to renovate it, or should we just purchase a different residence? The decision could be to renovate it, to keep that residence. We don't have a preference one way or the other. It really depends on the age, where it's at. We look at the building appraisal. Is it better, or rather the assessment, is it better to renovate or sell?
Great. We will go to Mr. Brock for 5.
When the Consul General, Tom Clark, was exposed as a liar in relation to the documents that this committee received, he wrote a letter to this committee. He said all his comments to GAC officials, meaning the two of you gentlemen, were only made in passing. And I think we can all agree as to what that term of art means, in passing. If I say, this meeting went well, that would be a comment in passing. If this meeting didn't go well, that would be a comment in passing. But when Tom Clark, the head of this most important mission in the United States, calls for an immediate replacement of the old residents, if that came from his officials, they certainly wouldn't be doing that without his authorization. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't be able to comment on this.
Well, of course. The bottom line is he is the head of the mission. Someone 5 or 6 or 10 layers below him is not going to make a decision to GAC that says, in my view, this official residence is no longer suitable. We need an immediate replacement. That comes from the top and it's filtered down. That was a direction made by Tom Clark. He influenced GAC in making this decision. Isn't that correct? He was instrumental. He gave the green light. He has lied to this committee. Do you agree that he has lied to this committee?
To my knowledge, he didn't lie to the committee. To my knowledge, I received a comment that has been referred to from his staff to our project management team. It's been written.
You think the words, we need an immediate replacement of this extravagant penthouse in New York City, you think that was made just a comment in passing? Like, how's the weather today? What are you doing for the weekend? It's a direction. Do you believe that's a direction? An immediate replacement. I want a new residence. This old residence is not suitable for me. That's a direction. Do you agree?
Mr. Clark didn't mention that to me.
Thank you. I cede my time to Ms. Guzzi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are head of chancery and head of administration the same currently at CNGNY? Yes.
Yeah, the management concert officer is the head of
Excellent.
administration. I mentioned head of administration
Perfect.
for simplicity.
Thank you so much, merci. Who were the heads of property under Mr. Bott and Mr. Vistra, please?
The head of?
Heads of property.
Oh, that would report to them?
Correct.
I wouldn't know their name.
Okay, could you please find out the information and get that to the committee, please?
I can look it up. Yes.
Thank you. Does, under the current platform structure, does WSHDC still have responsibility over CNGNY?
Can you repeat the first acronym? Sorry.
WSHDC, does it still have responsibility in the platform over CNGNY?
No.
Okay. That's interesting. That's changed. In your opinion, because when I left the platform, Washington still had responsibility over CNGNY. In your opinion, as an employee at a mission, would you do anything you possibly could to fulfill the request of the head of mission?
Well, if you're at the mission, you try to do what is best for the operations of the mission, which includes the head of mission being able to deliver what he needs to deliver.
Certainly. And would you say that the head of mission has the final say in terms of decision making regarding the mission?
Regarding the mission operations, the head of mission has the authority.
And thank you for that. And Mr. Chair, I will say to Canadians who are watching, I was at Global Affairs Canada for close to a decade and a half. I served in missions abroad, and I can tell you that the head of mission has the final say on all of decisions. You, as an employee in the mission, will do whatever you possibly can to fulfill the will of the head of mission. If the head of mission wants an event, you will do whatever you can to create that event for that head of mission. If the head of mission wants a relationship built, you will do whatever you can to create that relationship for the head of mission. If the head of mission in this case wants a new property, you will do whatever you can in an attempt to get that head of mission the new property. So you said yourself the mission informed you. Unfortunately, it seems to be you continue to run cover for Mr. Clark. So I will ask you one final time. Did Tom Clark lie to this committee?
No, Tom Clark didn't lie to this committee. This decision was made independently by headquarters, and he didn't have influence on it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mr. Shawari, please.
Thank you, Mr. Dubois. Welcome back to our committee. Hopefully, after Mr. Clark, you can go back to the work. That's very, very important, especially during this time. So I'm going to ask a bunch of very pointed questions. Hopefully, the answer is yes and no, and then we'll move on. Let me start at the highest level. Did the Prime Minister of Canada, Prime Minister Trudeau, have anything to do with the purchase of, or any influence with the purchase of this property?
No, he did not.
Did the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Joly, have anything to do whatsoever with the purchase, a decision to purchase or influence of this property?
No, she did not.
Okay. Did anyone within the office of Minister Joly had anything to do with influencing the direction that this process was going?
No.
Did Mr. Tom Clark, the head of commission, had any influence whatsoever in making a decision and influencing the process that your colleague, and I apologize, I'm going to really ruin your last name, Juan Zagabe, had in influencing that decision?
No, he did not.
Okay. Does the head of commission have influence in deciding whether they would like or they would not like to reside in a premises that's given to them?
No, they would not.
Okay. Can you draw a difference between a desire to build a relationship with, or improve a relationship with the G7, G20 mission, as opposed, and then all the group, all the team members mobilized to make that happen, as opposed to buying a property? Because that seems to be the last conclusion, that the head of mission, whatever they want, they get. And the base of that comment is that if a head of mission sees fit to build a relationship with, or strengthen a relationship with one of the G7, then that happens. What's the difference between that type of mandate or that type of goal or that type of desire, and comparing that type of influence with their ability to be able to choose a residence to live?
Well, what I would say is, in this particular case, it was a great opportunity to solve a decade-long problem that we had with an aging property that was not meeting our requirements, and acquiring a smaller and less expensive property, so creating savings, not only immediately, but also in the long term for Canadians. So in that, I would say that was the driver. Basically, there was no influence other than goodwill to fill a requirement that we had and creating savings for Canadians.
Thank you. I'm not sure how much time I have left. 2 minutes. Okay. So no influence at any level. A process was followed. The value, we've shown a positive value. And there are processes in place to be able to divest from the portfolio. Can you give us a range of the number of initiatives as such that exist right now across GAC to be able to replace a residence for the head of the commission?
Okay, right now, out of my working from my memory, I don't think we have a lot of projects to replace official residences, but we do have a lot of projects to either renovate, maintain, or upgrade some of those official residences. We came out of the pandemic with a large backlog. We had a lot of work that had been deferred, and our intention was to put the efforts to basically catch up on those delays. So we do have a certain number of official residences that are being looked at right now in terms of option analysis or projects that we would like to conduct there to bring them up to our standards. But I don't have a number directly in my head.
So this is this mission change, office change, is part of a ongoing process that the department is engaging in. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you very much. And I know you need a couple of budget items to pass, so I'll yield the rest of the time back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jouari. Mr. Dubeau, Mr. Uzongbi, thank you for joining us. Ms. Gay, thanks for joining us for a second time. You're close to the record of most appearances without actually being able to speak. So you are dismissed. Quickly, we have 3 budgets to approve.
Chair, sorry.
Yeah, can I get to my budgets first and then I'll return to you, please?
Okay.
First one, we've got, official residence, Consul General, it's 2,500, approved, wonderful.
Budget, not the cost of the residence, right?
Yes, thank you. The PBO meeting, we had him on for next week. The subs have just come out, so we're going to move him back because I don't think his report will come out in time.
Yeah.
So we'll move it back, but that's 750. Thank you. And then the last one for public service integrity and the procurement ombudsman. If you recall, we said we'd do 1 hour of each, but we have not scheduled a time yet. If we can have approval for that as well. Wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate that because I've already signed them in advance. Yes, Mr. Generous, don't mind being quick so we can get out of here.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I think we're into committee business now. So I'd like to move a quick motion that relates to what was discussed in the first hour. And the motion is that the committee call on Randy Boissonnault, Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages, to immediately resign from Cabinet, and that this call be reported to the House.
Point of order? Are we in committee business?
Yes.
This committee?
For the budget, yes.
I thought we concluded that already.
Well, we haven't concluded the meeting yet, sorry.
Yeah. So, colleagues, I think it's obvious why this is being put forward, why this is important. We have a Minister of the Crown who pretended to be Indigenous. He was described repeatedly by the Liberal Party as being Indigenous. He described himself as having a Cree great-grandmother in the House of Commons, which has turned out to be false. He misrepresented his identity, and we have heard repeatedly how serious Indigenous identity fraud is. And this minister did it for perhaps a variety of reasons, but clearly one of the reasons is that he was able to
have order, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Mr. Jonas. Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Sousa.
I'm having some misunderstanding here. Can the clerk define, are we in committee business? Would you just not, what is budget or not? Like, I'm being told that this is not committee business.
We were in committee business for the budget. We hadn't adjourned, but committee business till it's adjourned or not committee business.
I understand. Moving a budget is not the same as committee business.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's true that, for instance, when a committee does pass some budgets, it's for the purpose of writing the minutes. We will say that the committee indeed proceeded with the committee business. And also, I did notice that the chair, I think, mentioned that he wanted to do some committee business. So
yeah, we had committee business to pass.
But I think you've ruled in the opposite in the past, Mr. Chair.
We are in committee business, and Mr. Genuis has the floor. I understand what you're saying, but we are in committee business. Mr. Genuis has the floor. I'll put you on the speaking list after Ms. Blaney if you wish. Go ahead, Mr.
Chair,
Genuis.
this may be an uncomfortable subject for the Liberals, but the fact is we just had, before this committee, the Minister of Indigenous Services who affirmed that Indigenous identity fraud is a very serious matter, who pointedly refused to defend the employment minister at all, and we have a situation where, unbelievably, you have a minister of the Crown who sits in the government, whose company pretended to be Indigenous in order to try to access government contracts. His company, GHI, did get government contracts, and it's still eligible for government contracts.
Yeah. I'm sorry, and Mr. Generous, excuse me a sec. Go ahead, Mr.
Chair,
Long.
was this on the budget, or was this on the agenda, though? Man, this is not related to the budget.
Committee, it doesn't have to be related
can you guys
to the budget.
learn the rules, please?
I stated that we'd go into committee business at the end. We did that. We did not adjourn, so we're still in committee business. Mr. Generous, you have the floor, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Look, the minister who was here wouldn't defend Mr. Boissonneau, and it seems that these Liberal MPs are using
Sorry, excuse me, Mr. Generous.
fake points
Mr.
of
Long.
order to try
Chair,
to defend
I'd like
Mr.
to
Boissonneau.
challenge your ruling, please.
Certainly. Mr. Clerk.
Okay, Ms. Atwood?
No.
Separately, Charles.
Mr. Baines?
We can discuss after.
Mr. Baines?
Yeah.
The question is whether or not the ruling by the
That's
chair
funny
shall
to you?
be sustained.
Sorry, I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to listen to this, but you're interrupting. Sorry, say it again.
The question is whether or not the committee would like to sustain the chair's ruling or not.
No.
Mr. Johari?
No.
Mr. Long?
No.
Mr. Souza?
No.
Ms. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Jennings?
Yes.
Ms. Kuzi?
Yes.
Madame Vignola?
Wait.
Ms. Blaney?
Yes.
Yeas pour 5 and nays contre 5. So we need to break the tie, Mr. Chair.
Yes. I shall sustain myself. Mr. Generous.
Well, thank you, Chair. This is striking that. Whoa, sorry. Yeah. It's so striking, but I'll try to stand. Lean back a little bit. Yeah, I'll try to contain myself. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the Liberal Minister of Indigenous Services is unwilling to defend Randy Boissonneau over this issue of Indigenous identity fraud. Yet you have Liberals who are trying to avoid the discussion of this issue.
Point of order, sir.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes,
Is there a motion? Like, I don't know what he's talking about.
He read the motion into the record.
Well, I didn't quite understand that motion. I didn't quite hear it.
But then why did you challenge the chair over it if you didn't
Because
hear the
we're
motion?
not in committee business. We're not in committee business.
We are
I'm
in
challenging
committee
that point.
business.
Like, what were
I
you
have
challenging?
ruled.
No, we're not.
Colleagues,
Like,
please, let's address this.
I haven't
will
seen.
ask-
I'd
will
like to
ask the
understand
clerk
clarity.
It was read out, but I'll ask the clerk if he could
Please.
report it out to your P9. Continue, Mr. Generous.
Okay, so the motion has been moved. It has been distributed, but if members would like it read again, the motion is as follows. That the committee call on Randy Boissonneau, Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages, to immediately resign from Cabinet, and that this call be reported to the House. Conservatives, and I believe all other opposition parties, are calling on the Prime Minister to remove Randy Boissonneau from Cabinet. This is the minister who pretended to be Indigenous, who told the House of Commons that he had a Cree great-grandmother, which he now admits is false, who has made all sorts of contradictory claims about his identity, who the Liberal Party said was Indigenous at various times in the past. So this is a minister who engaged in Indigenous identity fraud, and he did it perhaps for a variety of reasons, but one of which was enabling the company that he owned to claim that it was Indigenous while bidding for contracts from the government that he is also a part of. So he's a minister, he owns a company as well. That company was bidding for contracts from his government, and he was claiming to be Indigenous. The company was claiming to be Indigenous owned, and neither of those things were true. But that this was designed to advance the commercial interests of his company and to make himself wealthier. This is the definition of corruption. It's identity fraud. It's corruption. It's lying about his identity in order to steal resources that should be going to real Indigenous entrepreneurs and real Indigenous communities. If that's not the sort of serious offense that leads to someone being removed from cabinet, then I don't know what is. And you know, Mr. Speaker, we've got 5 Liberal members sitting across the way who tried to prevent me from moving this motion. None of them are in cabinet. I'm sure all of them would like to be in cabinet, and yet Randy Boissonnault remains around that cabinet table despite his outrageous, offensive conduct. So the question today is, are we going to be able to pass this motion, or are we going to see Liberals who were passed over in favor of Randy Boissonnault filibuster to defend this corrupt pretender, or are we going to see this committee be able to get to a vote on this motion? And I hope we're able to get to a vote on this motion so that we can send a clear message that Indigenous identity fraud is serious, it's wrong, and it's been done in this case in order to advance the commercial private interests of a minister of the Crown. This is deplorable stuff. The minister must be fired. I hope we will be able to get to a vote quickly so that this minister will be fired, that a clear message will be sent to the House on this. And once we get to a vote, all committee members will no doubt be able to proceed with other things. So let's get this done. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ms. Blaney. Then Mr. Sousa.
Well, first of all, yeah, it is loud. I just want to ask, first of all, if the clerk could send us a bit of a calendar. I know that's a side note, but I heard a lot of things that we're going to do. It'd be great to have a calendar. I guess in response to this, I know that our MP, Blake Desjardins, has very clearly asked for the resignation of this minister. And I will say that I find it very sad and very frustrating. I am a white woman. When I was 4, I was adopted by an Indigenous family. I am very clearly white, but I belong to a family that is Indigenous. And I have to walk that line very carefully. And I do it very carefully, even when it hurts my family, because they feel that I belong to them. So when somebody is careless, and I'm not going to sort of give ill intent, I'm not going to say that he was a bad person who is upright lying. I don't know the story of his family. But when you do these things, you must do it very carefully to respect a people that has been marginalized since the very beginning of contact. And so to be careless about it is very upsetting to me, because it doesn't acknowledge the historic wrongs that have been done and the long-term implications of those actions. So when somebody isn't very, very clear of who they belong to, where they come from, and they make comments, it is harmful. So I agree with this motion. I don't necessarily agree with some of the drama that I'm seeing around it, but it makes me very frustrated to see a human being tell those stories of history like they belong to him without clarifying that they belong to him. Who gets to share a story is very, very important, and how you do it is very, very important. And, you know, we heard today with testimony from the minister about trying to get it right, and it's never going to be right as long as it's held within a colonial system. And so we need to make sure that the level of accountability is incredibly high, and that we don't mistake a colonial history, people losing connection to their traditions and their families because of that colonial history. Those are complex stories, but when they are told, they better be told correctly. And I'm very concerned that we have a minister that I don't understand not only why he isn't being removed, but why he doesn't gracefully and with dignity withdraw himself. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, but man, I have to say, when you're going to speak, you better speak honestly, and you better make sure that what you're saying is correct. And that is wrong. And so I will be supporting this motion. And I certainly hope that we can get this work done. And I really don't know why he hasn't stepped down.
Thanks. I have Mr. Souza and then Mrs. Block.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Brosno, the minister, I believe, is appearing before this committee, and he's agreed to do so. And I am of the understanding that there is lineage within his family with Indigenous members, and he's apologized for not making that clear. But regardless of all of that, it's also been very clear, and it's been stated multiple times, that the company of which he was a partner some time ago never received and has never been put on the Indigenous list. So that doesn't exist. And he never received contracts as regards to being an Indigenous company. So he's not on the list. He hasn't received contracts. And he's made it clear that he's not involved in the day-to-day operations of this organization. So, and then now the purpose of this motion is now to call into question the work of cabinet and those of the Prime Minister's office in determining as we go forward. It's not really relevant to this committee in terms of goings on with respect to what the decisions of the cabinet should be. I know they're so eager to be in power. I mean, they're already putting curtains up and trying to move furniture and trying to determine how to renovate the various residences and what they're talking about. But my goodness, we have ongoing regards to the workings of trying to enhance the contracts and the economic success of members of the Indigenous community. That's the whole point of going forward and some of the practices that we have in place. And we have systems to curb those that may try to be fraudulent in those activities in regards to any matter of procurement. So, Mr. Speaker, this motion is certainly all about politics. It's a great opportunity for them to do a few more social hits on YouTube. It's about their opportunity to get out there to provide for even greater misinformation and manipulation of issues, just as they're trying to do the same with the residents in New York. We have some serious regards to trying to help members of the Indigenous community. We have very serious abilities to improve their lot in life, and they have done an extraordinary job of getting involved in procurement and involved with contracts with government. In fact, I'm very pleased by some of the meetings and engagements that I've had with some of their financing groups and so forth. That allows for them to be at the forefront of major engagements in Canadian economic activity. And the members opposite, when they were there in power, so to speak, certainly trying to engage and be powerful in their accusations and in their slogans and in claiming falsely the notions of people's integrity and engaging with their own manipulation, frankly. And it's frankly somewhat disgusting to see the degradation they have of putting people through the ringer from the bureaucracy onwards. And yet, unlike the Conservatives at the time who were charged, who were found guilty, that was serious. What we're doing right now is try to ensure that the Indigenous community are protected. And those actions and activities have been taken. And when they were there, Mr. Speaker, they destroyed that relationship. There was no real truth and reconciliation. There was no proper engagement with members of the Indigenous community. In fact, it was the opposite. And now they're standing here trying to be all holier than thou when they're in fact the ones that were to blame from the get-go. We're doing what's necessary to provide for true partnership, for true engagement. They're taking and abusing the system for their own gain and not for the gain of Indigenous communities, certainly not for the gain of other Canadians who are working hard to establish that relationship, Mr. Speaker. I will be voting against this motion.
Thank you. I have Mrs. Block.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I do appreciate our colleague's intervention at the very beginning. I believe she's captured very well the essence of the issue that we are trying to address. It is welcome news to hear that Minister Boissonnault will be attending committee. That's a bit of a surprise to us, but it's a very welcome surprise.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
I do want to say
Point of order.
that
Sorry,
Just
Mrs.
to
Brock.
clarify, Ethics Committee, I believe he's appearing before the Ethics Committee.
Okay, you stated here, though.
Yeah, it was my wrong. Thanks.
Okay.
Welcome.
yes, absolutely. That's why it was a very welcome announcement here at committee. I want to be clear, because we heard this from the minister over and over again, that Minister Boissonnault's company, Global Health Imports, was not on the IBD. That's not the point. The point that his company was not on the list is not the main issue here. The main issue is that we have a parliamentarian, a cabinet minister, who has misled his caucus, has misled the cabinet, has misled parliamentarians, and has misled Canadians in an attempt to defraud the government out of money that was intended to go to an Indigenous-owned company, that was intended for Indigenous-owned companies. It's a small set-aside. We were very genuine, I believe all of us around this table, when we agreed to undertake this study on Indigenous procurement and to get to the bottom of what was happening. We've heard from many witnesses, many Indigenous organizations and witnesses who have identified for us that there is indeed fraudulent activity taking place within this program. I'm going to state it very clearly. The Liberal members around this table and Liberal members in the Liberal caucus cannot claim that this is a serious issue and that it must be looked into, and then not deal with their own colleague who has admitted to misleading Canadians, who has admitted to misleading Parliament, and who, by the Minister of Indigenous Services' own admission and testimony, is involved in fraudulent activity by the very nature of admitting that he misled Canadians by telling them that he was Indigenous when he was not. So that is the issue that is before us. It is our duty to hold a member of Parliament, to hold a member of Cabinet to account when they lie about who they are, specifically to defraud Canadians out of their hard-earned taxpayer money and to defraud a program that was intended for somebody other than themselves. I would ask that every member around this table support this motion so that we can demonstrate to Canadians that we are willing to take this situation seriously, that we do not support what this individual has done and the misrepresentation of his office and the authority that he has. And so I would call upon all members to support this motion and call for, to call for the resignation of Randy Boissonnault immediately.
Well, we have no one else on the speaking list. So, colleagues, I'm going to remind one last time, as I stated last meeting, to avoid this issue. I will announce the next two speakers. It's going to be up to you folks to maintain speakers list if you wish to. If not, I'm going to go straight to a vote in the future. So I warned last week.
Point of order.
Let me finish, sir. I warned last week, so colleagues, if you could just keep an eye on that, please, so we avoid that kind of conflict here. Go ahead, Mr. Gerritsen. Then I have Mr. Baines on the speaking list.
Yeah, just as a point of order, with all due respect, I mean, a debate is about listening and speaking. So I might not know that I want to speak until I've heard the last words that have been spoken. So I respect that ruling, but I would encourage you to at least keep the door open to the possibility that we might want to engage in debate as to the last
That is why I
words we heard.
recognized Mr. Baines and brought it up. But it's
Thank
not
you.
up to me to maintain
Thank
the
you, Chair.
debate, Mr.
Thank you,
Garrett. Mr. Baines, go ahead. And then I have Mrs. Vignola.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to this debate about or talk on this motion, and I see members from across the way who also, like myself, are in serving in the ethics committee, where the Minister Boissonnault is scheduled to appear, and maybe this could be one of those times that we can just have a friendly understanding, and many of the members here are also serving in that committee. They have the opportunity to ask these very same questions. He's already scheduled to appear, and instead of tying up the important work that we're doing here and duplicating that work, I think it may be an opportunity for us to agree that and members who may be here quite often come and sit on the ethics committee and have the opportunity to ask their questions there as well. So we do have an upcoming meeting where the minister is scheduled to appear. He's appeared there multiple times already. He's answered several questions on the magnitude of all of the investigations that are being directed his way. So I think that this could be a good opportunity to have an understanding and see and have this the questions that Mr. Genuis is bringing forward and that could be asked there in that committee. The minister is already scheduled to appear there. So I think maybe if we can all agree, that could be a good solution to moving forward from here.
Thanks. Mrs. Vignola, please.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me take the floor for a few moments. As I said earlier, I have friends who were not recognized as being Indigenous because their mother was Indigenous, not their father. This was fixed maybe 15 years ago, and they're older than I am. I'm 47. So they spent a large part of their lives being raised in their mother's culture, but without ever having the legal right in the eyes of the all-knowing country of Canada to call themselves Indigenous. I'm particularly sensitive to this issue. And to be honest, I'm listening to both sides. I haven't heard the minister say he is or isn't Indigenous. On the one hand, I'm hearing, yes, he says he's Indigenous through a grandmother who doesn't exist, who never existed, and then the other side is saying, no, that's not exactly what happened. So I will reserve the right to do my own analysis of the situation and avoid partisanship on this issue. As for the issue of his resignation, this has also been raised in the House of Commons. There's a question of privilege in the House. Is everything okay? Can I speak? Thank you. Very much appreciated. Forgive me. I'm used to being in a classroom where people listen to what everyone has to say and not people speaking across the table and over each other. So, at the moment, there is a question of privilege in the House of Commons that has to do with this very question. There's a study at the Ethics Committee that has to do with this very issue, and I believe that the question of privilege should be wrapped up before we move on. Every person, every party has a right to be heard under this question of privilege. asking the minister to resign today at OGO when the topic is being discussed, when it hasn't been explored at length yet, doesn't make sense. I believe we should see the situation with a bit of perspective here. If at the end of this question of privilege and the study at the Ethics Committee, if at that point the committee and parliamentarians determine determine the facts and it is not a partisan interpretation, then it will be up to the minister to do the honorable thing, or it will be up to the prime minister to decide what to do. If we're indeed dealing with pretending to have an Indigenous identity, which is a serious thing. So I would like us to respect the process that is underway, that was requested by the Conservative Party when it tabled a question of privilege regarding this issue with the minister in the House. And so I would like to be given the opportunity to hear the discussions within the House of Commons and to listen to the discussions within the Ethics Committee. And for those reasons, I will be voting against the motion today, the motion tabled by this very same Conservative Party.
Sorry, Mr. Jory, then Mr. Sousa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I am trying to make sense of why members of this committee is trying to bring a motion on a study that we all agreed. And the importance of it is clear to everyone. I personally was the one who bring it up during the ArriveCAN study, and I asked the Dalian president, like, what kind of value did your contract added to the Indigenous community? How many employees do you have that they're Indigenous? How have you built? So this study was is very close to my heart and our team. And I think a motion like this coming out of this study and this committee will actually do a lot of damage to the great work. And I'm really looking forward to the report and some of the recommendation coming out of the report. I think is going to do a damage on it. There are many unknown factors. What we know right now is there's a media report. There's claim that the minister had talked about the link to the lineage under two different, let's say, Indigenous group. And he talked about his interpretation, and he's apologized. Now, also, the company that he partly owned, and my understanding is he had divested long before, and was not on the list, as you heard today. And there was no contract awarded. I'm not sure whether there was any contract requested or there was no contract rewarded. There was no set aside. So when I look at this motion, I look at it and I say, well, the way that we are asking that the minister steps down and then report to the House is almost, if I want to be really partisan and if I want to draw a parallel, I can say, hey, look, you know what? The leader of official opposition has refused, repeatedly, has refused to get security clearance and come back and go and get the briefing that's needed. And as he claims, come back and say, hey, look, you know what? These are the members of parliament, openly. These are the member of parliaments that are on the list. So is it now fair, and is it the right thing? Not only fair, but is it the right thing to come and say, well, let's pass a motion that because the leader of the official opposition has stepped down, should step down because he's refusing to get the security clearance and then go and go and we report it to the House. So I think we should forego about this motion. I'll be voting against that. Thank you.
Mr. Sousa.
Mr. Chair, we've made it clear that this is being discussed at Ethics Committee. We are all concerned about making sure that the Indigenous community is protected, and I say we stop the discussion and go to a vote.
Anyone else? So we will go to a recorded vote. Sir? Mr. Shah? Mr. Baines?
Against.
Mr. Jouari?
Against.
Mr. Long?
No.
Mr. Sousa?
No.
Ms. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Brock?
Yes.
Ms. Kuzi?
In front of 11 Liberals, yes.
Madame Vignola?
No.
Ms. Blaney?
Yes.
Okay, yeas pour 4, 4, nays contre, 6, 6. Motion defeated. Adjourned.